Hello, everybody. Drasco here from uplevelmind.com, where my main mission is to help heart centered entrepreneurs who know all the business strategies realize their next revenue milestone by mastering what's between their ears. And for today's episode, we have a real talk segment where I bring in a heart centered entrepreneur who isn't seeing the consistent, stable growth in their business. And then live on the call, I get to help them get out of their own way on one inner challenge that they're currently experiencing towards their next business upgrade. And for today's guest, we have Cindy Myers, who owns and operates an alpaca farm in Oregon, while also working as an intuitive energy healer for humans and animals. She has clients all over the country and internationally. And she also teaches webinars on animals and emotions and intuitively listening. Plus, she also teaches animal communications classes. And in addition to that, she also coaches people, guiding them in honing and developing their own intuitive abilities. And not to say that that's enough, but she's also authored several books. So Cindy, thank you very much for being on. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. It's nice meeting you.
Very nice meeting you as well. And as I was telling you on the intro, I guess before we started the recording, you are the first one who I've ever had on the podcast, actually probably even met, that has their own alpaca farm. So I'm very curious to get this started. How does one, go from alpaca farming to intuitive healing? And I guess how do those combine together? I'd love for you to set us up for that.
Okay. Well, actually, before I even got the alpaca farms, to make it even a little more interesting, I started my career out as an aerospace engineer and worked for the Navy, for the United States Navy for almost 20 years. And I worked on radars. And so now I joke that I am a radar, but it wasn't quite a good fit. It wasn't the perfect fit for me working as an engineer, and a lot of life stuff happened. And actually, I got a master's in counseling while I was working as an engineer, and that was a little closer fit to my innate skill sets of being a very good listener. And then, but it still wasn't quite the right fit. And then a whole lot of life stuff happened, which we don't have to get into those details, but it was kind of a life do-over moment. And it was during that time I discovered the alpacas and went, oh, I really like these guys. These are cool animals. And they're highly intuitive. They're very intuitive animals. And so they taught me a lot about how to do this work. And because they're God, or whoever you like to think of, has he's kind of a practical joker and a good sense of humor. He made these incredibly lush, soft animals, but they don't like to be touched. So, so I had to learn how to do my skills at a distance. So they were really great training. And I'd only had dogs before, so I had to learn how to handle livestock. And so I boarded for 3 years before I found my farm up in Oregon. And it was during that time I really developed my energy work and learning how to do it at a distance and build the confidence and skill sets. And then once I moved up here, it just really continued to blossom and grow. And the alpaca business is one of those where you need a couple different income streams coming in, and that it's a trend, which we'll probably get into. I'm very good with the animals, but the business side was not as good. And so I needed another income stream instead of being not wanting to go back to a day job and 9 to 5 and working for somebody else. I really love being my own boss. And enough people were starting to ask me to help them with their animals and themselves with the healing abilities that I had developed and grew. I decided it was time to put that shingle out, and that was a perfect offset and synced in with the alpaca farm. So I could stay at home and work with my animals and then do this work, which I do all over the phone or Zoom. So I was doing that before it was the in thing with COVID. And it's pretty much the same thing where my business side, I've been studying it a lot over the last, I've had my farm here in Oregon for 12 years. So it's been a lot of learning, but I still have my fair share of hurdles of bringing in that your 10K norm in. It's a very thing like this. And I'd really like it to be more of this.
Got it. Well, okay. First and foremost, I would say, given the intro and like the, okay, so alpaca farmer to, intuitive and energy healer, and now you're adding in aerospace engineer and also a master's in counseling. I'm like, at some point somewhere somebody might petition this to be a movie, because it's like so much varied
Yes.
experience in one lifetime. So I just wanted to say kudos to that, and that's actually very cool. So there's a few things that I'd like to just kind of dive a little bit deeper on. So given the, because you said, okay, like I started working with animals and I developed my intuitive skills that way. And, I've had, it was kind of an impromptu thing. It was part of a bigger group, and there was a guest speaker who was, I think, I don't know if they called themselves an animal channel or animal intuitive, but like they read, as far as I understood it, like they use animals as their channel to pass on messages to
Mhm.
others. So I ended up being on the hot seat. So I had that kind of experience, and it was cool. And to me, it was very similar to just like getting other intuitive readings that I've done. I've just never had it like in this capacity. So both for my own understanding and for other people interested as well, because we do have a lot of heart center entrepreneurs that are kind of in my world. um, what, if any, differences are there in terms of being, okay, so like I'm my own intuitive or my own channel versus working with animals? And if you could just kind of elaborate a little bit on that and what your process is like.
Sure. Well, I'm more empathic, so I pick things up both physically and emotionally in my body. And there's a knowing, and it really works almost the same that way between uh, two legs or fours or with wings. It doesn't matter at that point because I'm honing in on what the energy blockages are that are created mostly by emotions that get stuck in the body. So a lot of the studying I get, and then bringing in the engineering part of my background, I see frequencies. So I see frequency distortions and then rebalancing. So I want to see everything get balanced to a certain frequency that allows your natural healing abilities to work with you. I would say the biggest difference between animals and humans is that animals are way easier. They accept the energy more. It's us humans that like to hang on to our baggage and gets in the way. I think it's kind of similar what you talk about with masks and things. It's like we put those masks on and we don't want to let it go. And so it's way harder sometimes to work with the humans to get them to let that go than it is for animals. But otherwise, it's almost identical. The only difference I would say for animals and people, and other differences, their emotional IQ and vocabulary is not as high. So, and it kind of species dependent too. But I would say they're more like working with a toddler in emotions. But if anybody who's seen a toddler have a temper tantrum, they can still have really strong emotions. It's just that they don't have as broad a vocabulary as most adults do. So that I would say that's the difference, but I'm picking it up in my body.
Got it. Okay. So that actually makes a lot of sense. And for my own clarification, so then do you work with animals as far as like in a healing capacity, or you work with their owners? And, like, I guess what's the capacity
Yes,
of your work with animals?
I do both. So I usually have the owner on the phone, and I actually work better over the phone, even if if I'm in the same town with them. It's because I'm so hypersensitive that I have to put up too many walls to protect myself. It's too strong of energy. So I'm actually way better over the phone. So I like to have the owner over the phone, and then I could tap into the animal through them, and I can sense things. If I'm doing it on a Zoom like we do now, I like to have a photo of the animal. And then I do like having the owner on as the person on as well, because I just get a brief hit. And so I need they help fill out the information of what this hit might mean, because the animal might send me something that doesn't make sense at all to me, but it does make sense to them. And so, and I also can work a little bit with animals that have crossed over. So they can pop in. So if somebody is wanting to connect with an animal because they're grieving over the loss of their pet, or I can tap into those that have crossed.
Got it. Okay. So it's not just like straight energy healing for the animal or for the owner. It's kind of a healing and reading
Right.
and whatever comes
So
up.
if an animal is not feeling well, then I can break up the trapped emotions that are keeping it, their natural healing abilities getting into that area. So there can be physical issues and there can be behavioral issues. So if they're having potty act incidences in the house or something like that, I can work with the animal to help remove the trapped emotions that are starting them to all of a sudden have an accident in the house, and then communicate to them what we rather have them do instead of having the accidents in the house. Go outside, go in your litter box, stuff like that. So I work with that. And then I also, half of my business is also working with humans on their own issues. So I bring in my counseling background and can work with them in removing trapped emotions and helping them, kind of like what you do then, in helping them unblock things. But I work with both physical issues for people that might have knee, back, neck issues. Common one is going to be coming up very, very soon with our tax time. And I get a lot of people with lower back issues around tax time. So we can help relieve that and then unblock them for whatever is holding them up in getting them to start working. They're procrastinating, getting going on their taxes. So then it goes into their back, lower back that's where that frequency likes to land. So I work a lot with people too.
Got it. Okay. So that makes sense. It's kind of a multi approach for whatever the problem comes up. So okay, that makes sense. And then going more than towards your actual business. So you mentioned a few different things when we started this call. So you said like, okay, the stability aspects aren't exactly there in terms of like the consistent revenue. And I'm assuming on the, intuitive side of the business, not necessarily the farming side of the business. Is that correct?
Well, they're both. Actually, the intuitive business has taken most of my work now. That is a way better, more productive, financially productive business. And so I use the animals, my alpacas now, I've incorporated them into the animal communication classes and stuff. So my clients that want to learn how to communicate, we use my animals. So I'm using them a lot differently than a traditional alpaca farm would, with birthing and having babies and all that. So I've tailored my alpaca business now to fold into the animal communication business.
Got it. So that's one aspect where, okay, it's for individuals that want to essentially do what you do with animals. So you use them as the channel and the proxy.
They're the teachers.
The teachers. Okay, perfect. And then there is the like you side of the business where you're the one doing the facilitating the work, the healing with
Correct.
the clients. Okay, got it. So that's the two biggest aspects then of your business right now.
Right. Yeah. The main one that I'd like to focus in on is my intuitive business, because that is my biggest income earning. So it has the most potential for growth.
Okay, beautiful. So with that then, because you have this wide array of experiences, this wide array of skills, this highly tuned, skill set as far as like actually like fulfilling on the services that you provide. So what then do you think is the biggest challenge for that next expansion of the business?
Well, I've been working on my outreach, and I think is my biggest struggle is how do I reach more people? Because I do, what I don't like doing is in-person stuff. So how do I reach? And then with COVID, of course, there are no big events anymore to do in person. So it's using the online tools to get my word out to other people. And then my biggest issue, my internal issue over that is tooting my own horn. I have a horrible time of just bragging about what I'm capable of doing. Talking about myself that way to make people want to come in. That's where my confidence. It's not that I'm not confident about my work. I love this work and I'm very good at it. It's giving the words to tell somebody else about it. It's a training from early days of don't brag about yourself.
Got it. Okay.
And then finding the right wording. I still struggle over what do you call myself? I don't even know what to call myself half the time. The intuitive energy here. What does that mean? So all of those things I've struggled for years, like putting a label on myself because it's like put me in a box when I've struggled to get out of a box. So there's some good fodder for you in helping me overcome some of those masks that I'm wearing.
And what would you say is the top masks? And for those people listening, so that there's a training that some people go through before they come onto the podcast where I talk about these masks that essentially we put on top of the sentiment that we're not good enough. So for some people, this is perfectionism. For some people, as you're describing right now, we have this visibility mask. So we'll put on whatever narrative or thing that we step into and act out as, that really would just perpetuate over time. And it just circles around this aspect of not good enough. Because really, if we just felt good enough, there would be no need to put on any sort of mask. You would just show up in your fullest, confidence or ownership of your gift. So having gone through that, like what resonated for you as far as the masks were concerned?
I think I'm an introvert, and there's a part of me that also got trained before I even knew I was an empath. So some little girl type, I was a little tyke, and adults telling me their problems. So I learned to be invisible in groups so people don't see me. And I think that's an unconscious dynamic that I still have, that I'm conscious of to a certain degree, but I don't quite know how to remove that because it's trying to protect me. Yet at the same time, I need that removed so that people can see me to come and get, find me. So I think that is probably a big unconscious dynamic that I'm not always aware of. And then I'm also very conscious of being, I think you talked at one point about burnout. So I'm very conscious because being around a lot of people wears me out. It's very tiring. And so I think there's that fear of burnout. But at the same time, I'm nowhere near that. So I would like more content. I definitely could use a lot more clients, because then it's that catch-22. Then you get the worry about, well, where's the next income coming in?
Got it. Okay. So yeah, I mean, the burnout's a concern, but when it comes to the visibility, it's like a far second in terms of priority. Like if the visibility stuff took care of itself, I could navigate the burnout and hold my own integrity with the energy and all of that.
Right. Because I have a calendar. I can control my calendar on how many clients I see in a day. So it isn't logical.
Yeah, so that's a great point, because none of these things are logical, but they're very emotionally logical. So it's that's the part we want to work with. So I agree with you in that. So this whole sentiment of the subconsciously kind of having these protections where you learn to be invisible, and I didn't want to handle everybody's problems as a little girl. I just wanted to like kind of hide away and not be in there. To what degree do you think they're actually like subconscious or unconscious?
Well, I think it does play an important part in how I word things when I'm writing my content. I suspect that energy is coming in to my writing, and it also comes into that other piece of not liking to brag about my skills. So there's that unconscious piece of trying to find the right wording. And I have to be authentic though. So a lot of the stuff that I've read in the past classes and stuff doesn't feel authentic to me in writing about myself. So I don't know if that writing about myself and what I've learned from marketing, if that's just not being authentic, or is that my fear brain saying, oh, you can't say that about yourself.
Got it. Okay. So is it actually authentic, or is it grandiose, or is it some combination of both? So I can't discern the split energy of like just getting away from that and owning whatever it is I want to say.
Right.
Okay. So there's like a distortion on the things that I know I want to say. I can't say them because they always come out distorted.
Correct.
Okay. Got it. So that sentiment then of being invisible, like how long have you known that?
That was one of the earlier things that I uncovered as I did my own self-exploration. And I would say even just when I was doing the alpacas, going to alpaca shows, people would walk right past me, not see me. Or even in the show ring, if I had the judges would kind of just walk past us. So I started noticing, it's like, why aren't people seeing me? I'm sitting right here. Hello. So I became aware of that, starting to become aware of that. And also then when I was doing in-person events, people walk right past my booth, but I share my booth quite often with another friend who's also very intuitive, and she's an extrovert. So when she was present in the booth, we got all these people here. Then if she went to somebody else's booth or walked around, it would stop. Nobody would come. They just walk right past. So I went, oh, nobody's seeing me. So even with me trying to open up and be more visible and let my energy out, they still walk right past me. So I went, okay, I can't, I haven't figured out how to make myself visible.
Got it. And how long ago would you say the first instance of realizing that was?
Gosh, I think I was aware of it as a kid even, but it's as a business, I was pretty conscious of it pretty quickly, that people just don't see me. Even as an engineer, they didn't see me. So it
Okay.
took a
So
long time for
if you had
people
to
to
give it a,
recognize me.
like, if you just like throw out a number, like, is it
Oh,
one
I
year,
would
2 years?
say, well, it personally speaking, I've been aware of it since I was probably about 6 or 7, but it is in business, I would say about 10 years.
10 years. Okay. For the business. And this would go from the like alpaca business to like the intuitive business. But 10 years, I've noticed this pattern.
Right. It's a pattern.
Okay.
It's still there.
Got it. And throughout those 10 years, have you worked on that pattern?
Absolutely. And I've done hired people to clear it for me. I've tried my own. It's improved slightly because I keep rewording my own language around it, um, and trying to expand my reach out. I changed my vision, my own, I guess, personal vision or of how that would look like instead of, so kind of retraining and reformatting my brain a little bit on that. And
Mhm.
so I was using the words of rippling out and picturing the pebble and rippling out. And then I realized, well, I'm getting a bigger reach, but it's still not coming back in. And so this is very recent. It was one of the recent podcasts that I was guest on. It was in Australia. And I went, oh, I need a boomerang. Instead of just rippling out, it needs to come back. So I started picturing boomerangs coming back, throwing it out and then coming back to me. And
Okay.
that's actually given me a little more bump since I started changing that mindset and picturing something that I could tangibly see.
Very cool. So I'm happy to hear that. So then, and part of the reason why I'm asking these questions, so okay, just get a bit more clarity then. So okay, like 10 years that I noticed this, I've worked on it in multiple different ways, right? So from different modalities to different approaches to different ways to tackle it, to my own inclinations towards it and using my own tools on myself and testing out different things. Like it's not like it's been on my mind for 10 years. Okay. I find that very interesting because when you started this whole thing, you said, okay, so I have some subconscious stuff around this that isn't cleared yet. I've spent 10 years doing stuff around it. I am very well versed and confident in my abilities to do it. The people that I've hired to help me with it, I've trusted them to help me and I've agreed with what they've done and I've seen some results. So going back to the original question, then to what degree is this really subconscious?
Well, I suspect there's still something back there that's putting the brakes on because I should be, there's the key there, from how many I've helped over the last however many years I've been in business, in the intuitive business. My business should be way busier than it is. It should be totally full by now. So what is that if it's not that, then what is that's still the block. And it, so something in my invisibility, people should be also referring me, the word of mouth. So is that energy keeping them from doing that too? What part of me that isn't wanting that expansion out there? And that the only thing I can think of is there is this play of every time I've kind of gotten it going again, it stops. It quickly goes right back down. It looks like I'm finally getting that footing to move forward, and people are seeing me. I do a big event or something, and people are excited. They see me, and then it stops. Nobody comes in from those big events. It's like, why didn't they hire me afterwards after they saw me?
Got it. So what if there was actually nothing wrong?
Okay. What if there was? I don't know. Then I'm doing something else wrong.
Okay. But in terms of, because okay, you mentioned a bunch of different things there. Like, I should be bigger given how long I've done this. I should be, having more referrals given the results that I've gotten. I should get people back after, I talk to them. So those are all their own issues, and they might be related to the visibility. But in terms of the visibility, right? Like the original way we kind of started this whole thing was, okay, like to what degree is it subconscious? Because that's kind of how you started this whole conversation with, right? It was like, well, clearly there has to be something there because my business isn't where it's at. Okay, so you could be fully visible and everybody could know you, but your business could still not be growing. So they may or may not be related. I just want to kind of, I'm not saying they're not, but I just want to separate them out as far as like if we're going to dial and laser focus in on one thing, and if it's the visibility, right? What if there was nothing wrong with your visibility?
Well, then it would be my copy or something that closes the sale or invites them in, or then it's just a skill set on the business side of how do you close the deal, the business side of perhaps my, inner packages of in my list and how to email people or reach out to them to draw them in, my copy. Maybe
Right.
that
So
is
like
it.
the skill set of doing that particular thing.
The
And yes,
marketing, that's just the pure skill set of marketing may not be matched.
yeah,
That inauthentic piece of not knowing how to write the right copy that closes the deal.
agreed. And even if the skill set was there, but if there was something behind it that was kind of distorting it, that would still be an issue. So
Yep.
to just reword my question in that case, going back to the visibility aspect again, like what if there was nothing left to fix? What if it was actually all fixed? What would you do then?
Look at the next layer then. If it's not that, that's not getting people in, and then there's another reason for it. So I have to keep looking at what other pieces are not coming together and meshing.
Perfect.
So I'd be at loss, which is where I'm at a loss at.
So that's the part that I would actually get you to question. And
Okay.
here's the reason why, right? Like I've identified something about myself that, while obviously rooted in childhood, and these things, have very real consequences to us as adults and all the things that you already know. I've spent 10 years identifying and working through that thing. I'm highly skilled at what I do. I'm good at discerning what needs to be done. And I've done a lot of it. But when you begin to speak about it, you speak as if there's always something more. And the irony of that is you're always going to find something more. So to give you an analogy of this, right? If somebody drew an outline of a house and you could identify that it was a house, like you have a kid drawing a house, you're like, okay, that's a house. And if the sole task was to find a house, you would be complete, right? But your inclination is, okay, no, I found a house, but it's just an outline of a house. I got to look closer. So then you start to draw into details of the house. You're like, okay, no, but like it needs color. So you start to like color it in. Like, okay, no, but I need to like shade it in. I need to make it nice. I got to make it 3D. So like you're spending all this time making a higher resolution house. Meanwhile, the whole time it's a house. And how this translates to what I'm hearing you say, it's, you started this whole thing saying, well, this is a subconscious or unconscious problem. Meanwhile, you gave me an extremely eloquent description of the various different perspectives that you saw this problem affecting you. So I'm like, it doesn't sound to me like what you lack here is awareness. I think you actually have a very high resolution house. You know the problem inside and out. But there comes a point where you make a choice. Do I want to keep exploring and keep making a higher resolution house? Or do I at some point move on and just admit that it's a house and go forth, right? Put another way, if I had a visibility block, right? It's kind of like a ball and chain, like you are locked down and under its weight. That requires healing. That requires letting go. It requires the stuff that you mentioned at the beginning, right? I see where the distortions are. I prompt people to let it go. And then the choice is, do you let this go or not? Right? So to me, it sounds to me like you've done a lot of that work. You've let that go in many different iterations and instances. But I think what you don't realize, the power of the choice that you have, is once I let go of the shackles, I am now free, but freedom requires walking away. And what I don't hear is the walking, right? I hear, no, this is subconscious. There's more layers to it. Clearly, I'm not doing something right. There has to be something more. Cool. That's just like putting on another shackle and then finding other ways to let it go. Where what I don't hear is, well, what if I just assume that, okay, I don't need to heal anything else about my visibility. I actually just have to overcome my resistance. So the habitual resistance, the repetition resistance, like the ego aspects that I just want you to repeat the familiar. What if all I have to do is actually just work through the resistance every time it comes up and just practice being visible, practice being the fullest self of me, because that's the part that you're lacking. You're lacking practice being your fullest, visible, most authentic self. You're looking at it on the opposite side, trying to figure out, well, how do I get to that point before I actually have to do this stuff to embody it, like think, feel, and act it. So how does that resonate with you?
Well, used to, back in my engineering days, we called it shoot the engineer.
So I'm actually not familiar with that term, but yeah, I'd love to know what you mean by that.
It means because we engineers like to always upgrade and redesign stuff,
Yes.
and it's like you gotta stop so that you can produce something. Otherwise, you're always reinventing, re-engineering something without ever getting to the finished product. So yes, I totally get what you're saying on that one. So it's I got to shoot the engineer in me that always wants to think that, oh, if I redesign this, if I need something else to fix in order to make this work, instead of and another example of it would be, because of the engineering side of me, I was always coming up when things weren't working or producing well, I needed a new idea. So I would come up with a new class, a new topic, a new this, a new that, a new service. So I was always inventing something new. And then finally, my guides came in and said, knock that off, stay with one or two things and hone in on those and just keep perfecting those couple services, or hone the project itself. Just stop engineering everything. So I've kind of settled my services down and done exactly what you suggested, for not keep on coming up with new ideas and trying to figure out a new big project to go out with people. Just stay with what I do and just keep repeating it over and over, which goes against my engineering side of wanting to invent new things all the time. So yeah, that makes sense. That totally makes sense.
Good. So I'm glad that it resonates. And yes, it's there's no need to optimize for the sake of optimizing, right? Like it's
Right.
optimized enough. We can move on, and we got to get to the stage where the rubber meets the road, right? Like it's not
Exactly.
anymore in the drawing board and, like you said, re-engineering and all of that. So yeah, we're 100% on the same point there. And even these other aspects where like it seeps into, I have, a high and then it's always followed up by this low and I can never get the traction. For somebody who's coming from this visibility aspect where it is safe to not be visible, as soon as you get traction, this is where the self-sabotaging pattern comes in and pulls you back. It will distract you to go somewhere else. It'll prompt you, oh, wait, remember that visibility thing? Better go reinvent it again, which then distracts you from the momentum that just got you to have that big win, right? It'll block you from having the forethought of the boomerang. Let me just put the stuff out, but never make an invitation for it to come back, right?
Right.
So it's that same pattern of, I am still convinced that I cannot be visible. Therefore, I will look for all ways to stay small, even like a fear of success in order to stay small. So I think that the thing that's lacking here isn't more awareness, like we already talked about, but it's actually courage, because it's courage in the active moment to moment, day to day decisions that are actually going to put you out there in the wrong way, in what's going to feel inauthentic, in what's going to be wrong, in what's going to bring you the wrong people. Like there is a trial and error that can only be gotten like when the rubber meets the road, that you can't get in the engineering room, right? You have to get that real world feedback to then iterate and change.
Right.
That's the part that's going to require courage. The iteration piece you're very comfortable with, so there's no courage needed. And that's where this whole loop wants to stay. And it's extremely comfortable in staying there because all it has to tell you is you still got to work on more of your visibility issues. You worked on them for 10 years, right? Like realistically speaking, if at this point you haven't had enough to at least move to the next level, I actually don't believe that. I think you've worked on it more than enough to get there,
Mhm.
right? But it's just that's the pattern that keeps repeating. So does that, like, how does that land for you?
Yeah, that makes sense that when you described that process of when the subconscious kicks in, that fits the pattern that I see, that as soon as I start to get a bump or a spike, that there's something that says, oh, time to slow it down. And that was that invisibility piece. So I can talk myself down from that, no, being aware of that pattern more. Uh, and it does make sense that it's a skill set of practicing the language of writing things and getting over. I mean, I spent a lot of time. We didn't talk about it, but I've spent a lot of time on my avatar for the great clients. So that's very well honed as well. So I have good faith in that. So it's still the copy part, I guess, of having the courage of putting myself up there with better copy and writing that out. And that is where my hiccup is a lot, is just sitting down and writing the copy.
Which is fair. And again, great awareness. I think the one thing that is not up for debate is your level of awareness around things. That's extremely
Yeah.
fine-tuned, right? So what I would just comment on that is like, okay, what you're describing on the copy, like it's a bigger question, basically saying like, how do I matter to the people that need me most, right? That is a skill set. Like if you take all the emotional drama and baggage out of it, it is a pure skill set. When I talk in this way, this is the feedback I get. I get crickets, I get the wrong people, or I get the right people, or I get the right people that aren't buying. Okay, that those become math problems. If I've had 100 conversations of this, what were all of the responses? What was the messaging? Narrow down your variables and go through it. So that is like a skill set that needs building. So if you think of, and this isn't my analogy, but it's one I picked up from somebody else, but it's like, if the skill sets are the rungs on a ladder, so you need to build up those
Mhm.
skills, and that's a repetition game. But those rungs on a ladder can only be built up to the extent that they're supported on one side by beliefs and on the other side by traits, right? So right now, the limiting factor for you was, well, it was the belief first. My visibility isn't fixed, therefore I will only build up my skill set to the point of playing comfortably small.
Mhm.
right? So now if you were to expand that belief, that now gives you a potentially taller ladder on one side. So you got more room to build up more of those skill rungs by going out there and actually practicing this. And the trait, like, so on the opposite side of the ladder, the trait that's missing here is not awareness or clarity or healing. It's actually courage. Because every time I try and put one additional rung onto that ladder, it's going to be held up by that belief that I don't need to fix my visibility. I just need to practice it more. To the extent that I can overcome resistance and embrace and embody courage in those moment to moment instances where I'm going to freak out and try and talk myself out of it, that's really what's going to make the overall ladder stable. In turn, that combination is what's going to make your business stable, because you're going to
Okay.
have to increase the capacity of holding in that polarity of, I'm scared, this is completely opposite of what I normally do, and I believe there is better and I can get better at this, and I'm going to do the actions that support it, right? For that short-term instance, that's going to be tumultuous, it's going to be turbulent, but that really is where the aspects that I
Mhm.
see for you lie.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And what I'm in my head, it's um, where my lack of courage or confidence is just in the business skill set. It's because it's been self-learned for the most part. I don't have faith that if I expend all this energy into these areas, I don't know which area to focus in on. And then I don't quite know how to do it. So in analyzing that piece, I'm not sure if is it my skill set that's weak, or is this not a good platform? Am I not doing it right? It's that it's really a lack of confidence and faith of, and there's so many complexities to it because they change the platforms all the time, the algorithms and all that. And it's like, it's so daunting. That's when I get totally struck too. It's like, well, where do
So
you
if
go
you
from
had
that?
to summarize that last narrative, that last story into one
Mhm.
sentence, what would it be?
It's overwhelming trying to know or learn. How do I want to say this? It's very daunting to know what areas of the business side to focus in on and learn and hone because there's so much.
Right. So it's
So,
daunting what to focus on. Kind of
right.
like
Do
that's a
you
summarizing.
focus on social media? Do you focus in on Google Ads? Do you focus in on this on Instagram? What do you learn when you're one person shop?
Right. So that sentiment of it's daunting to know what to focus on. How do you feel when you think that thought?
It's the deer in the headlight. Look, I freeze.
Okay. So freeze. And when you think the thought, like it's daunting to know what to focus on, and you feel like you're freezing, what action do you take?
Nothing.
And what's the result of that?
Nothing. Well, that's extreme. I will attempt to learn and then I quickly get stuck. You know, my learning, I always say my learning curve looks like this on all these projects or all these tools and platforms that I feel, you know, and you listen to different people that are experts, you take their training and you try it and it doesn't work. And so it's like, ah, so it's that I hit this ceiling almost every time. It's a pattern there.
Yep.
And not trusting then who to help. And I've hired people like you've talked about in your lead into your course. It's like you named everything. That's like, yep, done that, paid for it, hired people, tried to learn myself, and I just hit that same thing. And we talked about visibility, but I think that's my safe zone in understanding it. It's this stuff that is my biggest uh, weakness. It's
Right.
because it's unfamiliar and I don't know where to even go to get help. That with for somebody with integrity that's gets me, that can help me, that can guide me. I don't mind learning. I just want it to be effective time and as an expense on my dollars, limited dollars. If I'm going to invest on it, I want it to work, right?
100%. So if you're looking at that, so it's daunting to know what to focus on. I freeze as the feeling of that thought. My action then isn't necessarily to do nothing. It's actually just to go back to doing more learning. What's the result of that?
Nothing. It hasn't given me a good ROI on all that time invested. And then because I've spent so much time, I go, well, why bother? Why do another thing if I'm going to get the same result?
Right. So then to go back to kind of your original question, right? Like it's daunting. I don't know. What do I do? The result of that thinking is nothing.
Right. It isn't productive either.
Correct. So now it really comes down to, is this narrative actually serving you to move forward?
No.
It's not. And I would agree with you, as evidenced by the results that you're getting. Why?
Correct.
Because your action upon freezing and thinking that narrative is to simply go back to the comfort zone and learn, iterate, go back to the drawing board, right?
Right.
The complete opposite narrative and action set that we just identify you need to do to exercise the courage to be more visible, right? And therein continues that loop, even in the approach of trying to fix the problem.
Okay. So I'm doing the same cycle then of okay, yeah, that makes sense. So
Yes.
my comfort level is to when I get stuck is I need more education. But the
Yes.
education isn't helping me because I'm not really solving the real problem.
You're
Or
always playing the wrong game. You're
I'm I'm
playing the
I'm
game that
I'm putting up
optimizes.
more house, I'm decorating the house more and there's still a house.
Correct. So your default game is to optimize for smallness. How do you do that? You do that by convincing yourself that you have to be fixing your visibility at the extent, like at the trigger that you start to actually fix your visibility, you stop right after the learning.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because the learning keeps you exactly where you are, right? It is the same, but different aspect. I don't know if you've ever heard like
Okay.
same, but different. It's,
Yeah,
it's,
right.
it's different. It's exactly the same pattern
Yeah.
rooted in, God forbid I do anything that actually puts me to be visible and take ownership of how good of a practitioner I actually am, right? Like if we're going to fundamentally put it down to one thing, that's now you've identified it seeping into the self-made confusion and narratives about my choice of media, to how I write content, to how I show up, to my willingness to show up, to continue doing the things that brought me an up spike, right? And not self-sabotage the success there. It is pretty much seeping across your whole business right now.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. So how do I shift the perspective and look at a different path?
So the short answer is that's kind of beyond the scope of
Okay.
this particular thing, because it's going to dive into a lot of different things, right? It's going to dive into self-worth and what I'm charging. It's going to dive into, consistency and habits and how well do I actually beat resistance on a consistent basis. It's going to dive into the beliefs I have about myself, my capability, and actually trusting myself to execute, right? It's going to dive into enough of the iterations beyond learning to actually learn a skill set. So not like what I know I can show, but what I can't show, I actually don't know. I understand, right? And you're in the understanding phase of all of these things. So it's the short answer is like it's outside the scope of this. The longer answer is it's short because it's going to dive into so many aspects that like you need multiple iterations of this to actually dive through it. But really it just comes down to right now you're embodying, and I define embodiment as thinking, feeling, and acting in accordance with smallness. What you lack is the capability to think, feel, and act in accordance with like your magnificence, right? That really is what it comes down to. And that has multiple components, like we said, from the skills to the actions, to the beliefs, to the traits, all of those aspects. So does that
Okay.
answer your question, or
Yeah, no,
I know
it
it's kind of a
perfect.
non-answer, but I just
No,
want to
no,
make sure. Okay.
it fits, I understand
Okay, sounds good.
completely.
Well, in that case, just to kind of make sure that we put this container into a close, like, does that feel complete for you, or is there still something left outstanding?
For this part of it, yeah, absolutely. You've given me a lot of food for thought and clarity, which I've had a couple really good aha moments today. So I really appreciate that.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you for coming on here, because I know it's always funner on this end than on the receiving end. So
Well, actually, it was very fun today. So I
okay,
appreciate it.
good. Well, I'm glad to hear that. So in that case, if you can just close us off by kind of giving a summary of what your realizations were today, what your experience was like, and what your takeaways are, kind of the floor is yours to close us off.
All right. No, it really did help giving me that clarity of seeing some of the patterns and a language that I was missing in understanding this pattern of that I'm in the cycle. So that will help me greatly, I believe, in recognizing when I'm repeating these patterns so that I can get out of it more quickly. And I am eager to figure out how to see how to get out of this pattern because I have seen myself really high in what I'm capable of. And that's where my frustration has been is like, how do I get from here to here, which is where I know I'm supposed to be. And so you've given me some really good information on helping me starting to see a glimmer of how I can get up to this place. So I really appreciate that.
Beautiful. I'm very happy to hear that. So in that case, thank you very much for coming here today. And then you can just let everybody know, where to find you, who's the best person to find you. Floor is yours for that.
All right, thank you. You can reach me at my website is yourenergyhealer.com. And there's a contact page right there. You can reach out to me right there, or you can call me at, 541-658-5062.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. And for everybody else
Thank
listening,
you.
you're very welcome. But yeah, for everybody else, we'll see you on the next one.